had experience in a number of industries. I wanted to know what drew him to health and wellness specifically. He also talks about how the name Simply Wholesome came to be. So, you got your degree, you started teaching, you've done now the athletic equipment selling. Is that how you got into nutrition and got into created Simply Wholesome, or how did you get into
how
that?
I got into Simply Wholesome, as I mentioned, I was a distance runner, so I was training for the 1980 Olympics. And we had the boycott in 80, so I was very disillusioned because I sacrificed a lot of time from 76 to 80 doing jobs like say selling equipment and stuff like that so I could have time to train. So anyway, the bottom line was I used to lift weights at a gym called, it used to be Jacqueline European Health Spa. And I walked in one day and the gentleman that had the nutrition center really had a bad attitude. People really didn't like him. And he asked me if I would be interested in buying the nutrition center. And honestly, I don't know if he was asking everybody that came in that day, but for whatever reason, he asked me. And I was always business orientated. I always wanted to do my own thing. I just didn't know what I wanted to do, And so I said, yeah, I'll buy it. And the next week, I purchased the nutrition center. And I started from that perspective, I started reading books. I used to sell these little dollar books called Dr. Don Box, and it would talk about stress, or it would talk about cholesterol, and talk about whatever. So when, during that time, Jacqueline would have alternate days. I think it was Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays, that was Women's Day, and Tuesday, Thursday, Saturdays was Men Days, and then on Sundays it would be co-ed. So during the time, women were working out, and again, in the early 80s, this was like 81, in the early 80s, they had the aerobics crave with Jane Fonda, and they had the 5 and 10K crave, where every weekend people would get out in bulk and run. And in the 70s, the only people you would see working out were athletes. You didn't see that, what I consider the average person running or sweating. You didn't see sisters out there working out or anything like that, or little kids or anything like that. But in the early 80s, that aerobics, women started getting into it. And so I saw that transition when I was at the spa. It would just get full. And then, like I said, because I was still running, I would go to these 10Ks and I'll have 1,000 people, 2,000 people running. So again, I saw little kids, all different age groups, all different nationalities starting to work out. And I saw that transition, and still I wanted to do my own thing because I was very limited being inside of their building. I can only sell Jacqueline products, but there was a lot of products that were a lot cheaper and a lot better. So one particular morning I was running, I lived in a neighborhood, and I was running up Overhill right here, and I cut across the parking lot and I saw a sign that said for rent. And I went about a block further, and something spiritually kind of hit me in the chest and said, turn around. And I turned around, memorized the number, called, and I was fortunate enough to get the spot. I was able to gut it out, and Simply Wholesome was born. The first location was the nutrition center, and the way I came up with the name of Simply Wholesome was very organic, I believe, very spiritual. I had about 2 weeks before I had to actually open the doors, and I couldn't think of a name, and I didn't want to put nutrition center because it was very generic. And one night, and I was seriously stressed and I could not sleep at night. I don't know if you've ever been in a situation where you're asleep, but you realize you're not sleeping. Your mind is just working like a computer. And Wholesome, no, excuse me, Simply popped up in my head. And I said, Simply, and it just felt good. So I was putting names behind Simply Raw, Simply this, but it didn't really fit. So about 2 nights later, the same scenario, Wholesome popped in my head. And I said, Simply Wholesome. It felt so good, I thought that I had read it somewhere or I had seen it on a billboard or seen it somewhere. So I called 411, and I asked, can I have the number to Simply Wholesome in Los Angeles? No listing. Simply Wholesome, in the Valley. I just hit all these different area codes. There was no listing. So I said, that's it. And that's how the name Simply Wholesome was born.
Simply Wholesome came to you in the middle of the night, and you had to fact check, of course. So 411 was the fact checking to make sure it didn't.
Yeah, because I thought sure that I had seen it somewhere, or but it was for me. This whole journey has been very, very organic for me, and I'll be honest with you. Sometimes I wonder how I done a lot of things, I just kind of do things. I don't really think about it until other people kind of bring it to my attention. And sometimes, not so much now, but sometimes I used to get nervous. I'll be like, oh, can I handle this? Oh, is this too much? And I start doubting myself, and I had to work through that and just kind of stay focused and just kind of let things just flow,
It's not always easy. And running a business sometimes has moments you just think you can't get through. Purcell talks about one of those moments and what, or should I say who, got him through it. You did mention that you had some doubts going into business. Now, how did you get over those self-doubts?
Well, there was a few things that happened to me when I got ready to expand to my present location. One major hurdle was, let me backtrack. What had happened, I had been at my old spot for 8 years. It was time for me to renew the lease. And I had been working 7 days a week, and I had the American dream at that time. I had my 2 daughters, which were 6 months old and a year and a half. I bought a house, picket fence, dog, cat, the whole 9 yards. And at that point in time, I was in what I call a comfort zone. Everything was just kind of rolling. I was making money, everything was happening. Well, it was time to renew the lease. My landlords were on the business right next door to me, and I went to renew the lease. Well, the bottom line was that the landlords went up on my rent 50%. And I remember discussing that with my landlord, and she basically said either pay or leave. And so it was like somebody took out a knife and stabbed me in the heart. And I remember going back into Simply Wholesome, went behind the counter. This property here was sitting vacant for 6 or 7 years because we had the uprising in 1992. They had redlined the area, so they almost said there was no life east of Sepulveda. And so this was sitting on an acre of land, and nobody wanted to purchase it because it was a minority area. So when I went behind the counter, now granted, I'm working 7 days a week, looking at this property and seeing it and not seeing it. After that meeting, it's like somebody took blinders off, and all of a sudden I saw the property. And I realized that I had to have my own place and my own property, because I realized after that meeting that my income could go to zero overnight on somebody else's decision. And that was a scary, scary feeling, because she could have easily said, I don't want to rent to you, and today I'm making money, tomorrow I'm not. And so I jumped on my high horse and I realized that it was just more than me now. I had babies, I had a responsibility, and they were depending on me to make it happen, you know. I was the master builder. So I contacted the owner. I used to see him come and check his property, and I asked him one day, I ran across the street, I said, I'm interested in buying this property. And he said, you can't afford it. And I said to him, well, you don't know what I can afford. And he told me that he had somebody that was gonna pay cash for the property. And so that was pretty much it. And so I saw him again about a month or so later. I ran across the street again. And I said, hey, I'm still interested in buying this property. And again, he said the same thing. So what I did, I gave him an offer. And I don't know if I mentioned that when I was in college, my junior year, I took my real estate license and I started selling real estate. I didn't make any money, I only sold one piece of property, but the experience that I learned reading up on real estate helped me almost 20 years later when this opportunity popped up. And what I told him, I said that I'll give you $100,000 and we'll open up a dual escrow. And I'll put the money in any bank you want it. And I said that if this person doesn't execute on this particular day, then I'm in the first position and we'll go from there. And so he agreed. And so I had nothing to lose, he had nothing to lose, you know, but I wanted to show him that I was serious.